Thank you very much for joining us, Kalipa. Now, back in the 90s, we saw groundbreaking legislation against public smoking introduced in the country, more so at a time when it was even unheard of. And even then, the resistance was fierce. Looking at the challenges to come, what is the nuisance being avoided here?
Hi. I think the nuisance to be avoided is the spread of the COVID virus. And if one looks at the manner in which it's transmitted and what it affects the lungs. So I think, as a layman, I'm not medically trained, but the argument goes that if your lungs are affected already by smoke, it'll be that much more if we allow people to smoke and compromise their situation and their health further. So I think that's the mischief that we're trying to avoid, specifically in relation to the ban on tobacco and the selling of cigarettes.
So that's what we're trying to avoid. But there's an argument that this is having an impact on the economy and jobs. What consideration would the judge have to make? You have public health versus economic losses. Does one supersede the other?
I would frame it a bit differently. So what I would look at it, these are all competing rights. People have a right to trade, to engage in their profession and to earn an income. On the other hand, people have a right to life. And we entrust government to balance these rights in the way in which it governs the country. So instead of saying that one right supersedes the other, it will be a matter of limitation of rights. So insofar as we are dealing with the conducting of a trade or an industry, or you conducting your business, we have to look and see whether government has legitimately limited that right. And if we look at the Disaster Management Act, there's actually another piece of legislation that's related to that. It's called the International Health Regulations Act, which is a less invasive way of actually addressing this issue. The Disaster Management Act covers disasters, so an argument could be made in that respect to say that why did government declare a disaster when it could have dealt with this with more specific legislation that is directly aimed at addressing health pandemics. So if one looks at the rights as a whole, the rights to conduct a trade, the right to life, the right to movement, I would phrase the question as, has government legitimately limited these rights as opposed to one superseding the other?
Right. And what is the risk for government here?
I think the risk government faces is that it could find itself in a situation that if a court finds against it, it has to go back and run the process again. That may be a bit of a logistical nightmare if you consider the national application of this law, apart from the fact that it could end up with a bit of egg on its face. So it's a very delicate balance, and I think government needs to go back and make sure that they have done this correctly to ensure that we have a smooth transition and management of the whole pandemic.
How important is effective communication in these cases?
I think it's very important, and I think this is one of the things that people are having a problem with. There's this, I think it's the National Command Committee, which is making decisions on this matter, and there's no, as far as I'm aware, they are not a legal structure that has been created in terms of statute or any other recognized manner. And insofar as the communication of decisions to the public, I think that it's important that it's done by a legitimate functionary or the duly appointed member of the executive under the Disaster Management Act. And that at the moment is Dr. Dlamini Zuma.
Thank you very much to Kalipa Mafungo from Mafungo Law.